Willis, a member of the Omaha Press Club Education Committee. At least once a month, the Press Club sponsors a noontime forum at the club on issues we think is of interest to our members and the public at large. You do not have to be a Press Club member to attend. And we welcome the audience here at the Press Club today and our radio audience from KIOS Radio. There's pencil and paper to write your questions, and they will be picked up and brought to the podium, and they'll be read. We're excited to welcome two guests today, each advocating for a different vision on how to best serve students in our communities. Katie Linhan leads Education Nebraska, supporting more access to private and charter schools for Nebraska families. Katie was born and raised in Omaha and spent more than a decade working with underserved youth, primarily in North and South Omaha. Most recently, Katie was a middle school teacher at Success Academy Charter School in Harlem in New York City. Other classroom experiences include teaching English in South Korea and as a kindergarten lead at Girls Inc. in Omaha. Ann Hunter Pirtle leads Stand for Schools, promoting public schools in our state. Ann grew up in Lincoln, graduating from Lincoln Public Schools and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Prior to founding Stand for Schools, Ann spent 5 years in Washington, D.C., working at the U.S. Senate, the White House, and the Environmental Protection Agency. By the flip of a coin, Katie will speak first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if So, I'm going to put my water here and hopefully not spill it. Hi again, or rather, as he said, my name is Katie, and I am the Executive Director of Educate Nebraska. And before I get to my prepared remarks, I just want to thank the Omaha Press Club for hosting this event, and thank Ann for agreeing to participate, and thank everyone here for coming today to listen and hopefully learn a little bit more about this topic. As I'm going to go into, I think it's one of the most important issues really of our time in Nebraska and in America. So, as a school choice supporter, I believe every child in every zip code deserves a high quality education. Today, I'm going to tell you how I came to this conclusion and why I work alongside millions of parents and educators who believe the same thing. When I was 16 years old, a close family friend introduced me to 4 little boys whom I got to know much better, beginning with tutoring after school, and we would go roller skating together and to movies and back to school shopping. And the boys lived just northeast of 30th and Cumming, so pretty close to here, in North Omaha. And at the time, I was attending Duchesne Academy, which also most probably here know is a private school in Omaha, and it's just southwest of that same intersection. And as I got to know the boys better, a few things really stood out to me. First and foremost, their potential. These kids were just as capable, or more capable, of any kids I have ever met and have met since. Second, I began to notice that the public schools that they were zoned to were much different than the public schools I'd attended, even though we lived in the same city. And finally, and this really didn't occur to me until much more recently, is that my parents' ability to leave Millard Public Schools for Westside Public Schools, specifically because of a certain program Westside offered that Millard didn't, was made possible by their ability to pay a mortgage. And later, their ability to pay tuition so I could go to private high school. So that's important to note because school choice isn't a new phenomenon in America. My parents were able to exercise it again by choosing a zip code and by paying tuition. But for thousands of children in Nebraska, that is not a choice. So I'm not going to stand here before everyone that took the time to come today, and I certainly would not stand in front of a room full of parents who cannot afford a better option for their child and tell them my siblings and I should have benefited from school choice, but their children should not. So Let's talk about what charter schools are and what charter schools aren't. Charter schools are free, public schools, and that's often misconstrued, and it was a little bit on the flyers I noticed, charter schools versus public schools. All charter schools are public schools. They're free, they're open to all students. They can't charge tuition, they're free. Every child who wants to go to a charter school has an equal opportunity, which is only limited by the space in that school. Charter schools have a little more autonomy than traditional district schools, but they also have more accountability. So what does that mean? By autonomy, charter schools can operate a little differently than the district schools, and one of the things that stands out the most is charter schools typically are not governed at all by teacher union contracts, whereas most district schools do operate under union contracts. So what does this mean? It means a charter school can recruit, reward, and retain teachers based on effectiveness rather than things like seniority. It also means that charter schools can offer kids longer school days and longer school years if that best fits the needs of the kids and their families. What does it mean to have more accountability? If a charter school is not working, it can and it should close. The same cannot be said for all traditional schools, many of which continue to operate even if they've been failing for decades. So, take Omaha. 2 out of 3 public schools east of 72nd Street in Omaha have math and reading proficiency rates of less than 25%. Most of these schools have been persistently failing for years, yet they remain open, and for many children, they are the only option. Under a good public charter school law, this does not happen. The vast majority of public charter schools in America are non-profit entities, and every single charter school law that has been proposed in Nebraska to date requires that the school would be a non-profit school. So, do some charter schools fail? Yes. Are some charter schools mismanaged? Yes. But in every instance where a charter school falters, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of a traditional district school failing or fraud in the system. And just last year, most in this room probably remember when students were stranded in the street instead of learning in classrooms because of district mismanagement. More recently, Superintendent Finance 3 in OPS voluntarily withdrew from consideration because, as one finalist put it, the school district does not have the best interests of kids in their actions. As a way to explain away charter school success, which I'm going to get to, some claim they are selective, creaming the so-called best students from the rest. And I hate that term because I don't think we should be saying which kids are best and which are not. But what I want to tell you today is it's a myth and it's been debunked time and again. So I worked at Success Academy, as was mentioned, in New York City. And Success Academy started as one charter school in 2006 in Harlem. Today, it is a network of charter schools that serves more than 17,000 students in 41 schools throughout the city. And these schools exist in the poorest areas of New York. 77% of children attending Success Academy are from low-income families. 95% are children of color. 15% qualify for special education. In the most recent school year, Success Academy students performed in the top 0.3% on math assessments that every kid in the state has to take, and in the top 1.5% on reading assessments. This means that poor kids in Harlem, which is where I taught, poor kids in the Bronx, and poor children in Queens are outperforming their wealthy peers on the Upper East Side, in the wealthiest suburbs of New York City, and in the most affluent areas of the entire state. Tragically, and this really is a tragedy, and it's hard to grapple for if you like charter schools or if you don't. For every 7 kids who want to go to a Success Academy school, there's only 1 spot. In the Bronx, that ratio is 15-1. This has nothing to do with the school's desire to expand to serve more children and everything to do with political agendas and unnecessary roadblocks. The most profound obstacle to quality growth of successful charter schools throughout this country, including in Nebraska, are the special interests that prioritize adults before children and the lack of political will to confront those interests. The teachers' union is amongst the most powerful political force in our state, and many elected officials rely on that force to get elected. While such support is often more prevalent for Democrats, and I'll admit I'm not a Republican, but that's just how it is nationwide and in Nebraska, many in the Democratic Party have broken with the union on this issue, chief amongst them President Barack Obama and Senator Cory Booker, both outspoken, unapologetic charter school supporters. In addition to the union, there are some individuals who feel compelled to defend the status quo, clinging to their own views of what the traditional public school system symbolizes, what it could be and what it should be. And in a perfect world, every school would work for every child. But this is simply not the case. And this viewpoint and source of motivation, like the ability to choose a school based on moving to a different zip code or paying private school tuition, is a luxury afforded to some and not others, based largely on wealth and privilege, or the lack thereof. There is a man I respect greatly, and he came to Nebraska this spring to advocate for children and families. His name's Kevin Chavis, and he was a city councilman out in DC and really fought for kids while he was out there and is involved in the school choice effort still. And he often says, and I believe this to be true, the only people who are against school choice are those who haven't. I attended public schools in Omaha up until high school, and my niece and nephews do today. While it's true that charter schools are expanding throughout the country, most children do and will continue to attend traditional district schools. If charter schools harm children attending these schools, I would not be advocating for them. And the thousands of educators working in charter schools today who get up every